They called it the Age of Soldiers. In that age, wars were decided not only by armies, but by secrets, by deals signed in shadow, by loyalties forged and broken, and by machines that turned intimidation into policy. This is the story of how nations hid their hands, and how those hands shaped the world. This is the story behind Metal Gear. The tale begins not with modern headlines, but in the chaotic aftermath of a world war. A handful of the world's most powerful figures, bankers, generals, and politicians, stitched together an invisible network of influence. They called themselves different names, but their purpose was the same: to steer history from behind the curtain. Into this web stepped a soldier known as the Boss. She was a living question, brilliant, merciless, and bound to an ideal that made her actions almost impossible to judge. The missions she accepted blurred the line between service and betrayal. Her decisions were both tactical and deeply philosophical. And when politics demanded a performance, she performed in a way that cost her everything. In doing so, she became the spark that would ignite a legend. The soldier who carried the Boss's memory became Big Boss. Haunted by what he saw as betrayal and disillusioned by governments that used soldiers as mere instruments, he rejected his old loyalties. He envisioned a new kind of soldier, fiercely loyal not to flags, but to comrades. A soldier who answered to a human bond, not to faceless politicians. His break with the system birthed a whole new industry. Private armies, mercenary nations, and bases that answered only to contracts and charisma. Where soldiers once served countries, now they served employers and ideals. This shift reshaped modern conflict. Wars became contests of hired forces and shadow influence, rather than public declarations between nations. But fear and ambition push people toward the impossible. Some sought to bottle the greatness of Big Boss himself. Secret projects were launched to clone heroism, to reproduce a warrior's instincts, his memories, and his genetic code. They wanted to create heirs who could be shaped into whatever their masters desired. The result? 3 men, born from the same template, each raised to reflect different facets of the original's virtues and flaws. These new sons of a legend would carry the world's conflicts forward, turning global struggles into deeply personal battles. Then, a terrifying innovation changed the rules of deterrence forever. A walking battle tank capable of launching nuclear weapons from anywhere on the planet. These machines, known as Metal Gear, turned the old balance of power on its head. A nation no longer needed a secure silo to threaten annihilation. A single group could hold the entire world hostage with a mobile engine of dread. This possibility reshaped global strategy. It empowered non-state actors, mercenary leaders, and shadow organizations. Suddenly, the threat of nuclear coercion rested not only with states, but with any force bold enough to seize the technology. The Metal Gear transformed modern fear into a physical stomping presence. Meanwhile, power learned that the most durable control is invisible. Instead of ruling through loud decrees, a new generation of organizations mastered subtler tools. Networks of influence, media manipulation, and the quiet steering of institutions. They rewrote what people believed was normal, curated history, and groomed leaders from the wings. This architecture of control wove itself into everyday life. Elections, economies, and even cultural memory were shaped by actors who never appeared on a ballot. Their priority was stability, or rather, a stability that served their ends. To those living inside the system, the world seemed to be moving along just fine. But to those who looked closer, it was a theater where the scripts were constantly being revised. It all came to a head at Shadow Moses, a remote, icy base meant to hide these dangerous secrets. An armed uprising, a stolen Metal Gear, and a hostage situation forced the world to stare at a problem it had assumed was contained. What was meant to be a hidden threat spilled into headlines, revealing fractured loyalties, buried deals, and the human cost of keeping secrets. That crisis served as a powerful lesson. Secrecy is fragile, and when the truth breaks out, it does so spectacularly. The fallout can topple reputations, destabilize alliances, and force nations to answer questions they had long dismissed. From the top-down machinations to the front-line betrayals, the saga became intensely personal. Brothers in arms turned into bitter rivals. Friends became symbols for causes they never intended to embody. Each key figure carried the weight of a personal history, a wound or a belief that shaped decisions with massive global consequences. The clones, the mercenaries, and the rulers all reached a point where ideology met blood. Some sought to end the cycles of violence. Others aimed to forge new orders from the ruins. The outcome was not simply strategic, but moral. It asked whether the means could ever justify the ends, and how much a single life was worth to a grand, calculated plan. Eventually, at a decisive moment, the secrets were exposed. The mechanisms of control were dismantled. The networks that had once seemed immortal were shown to be fragile, dependent on human error and hidden resentments. What followed was messy. Regimes lost credibility, shadow organizations splintered, and the public had to reconcile with decades of manipulation. But peace was not immediate. The aftermath left broken institutions, displaced people, and a world that had to relearn what it meant to trust. The loudest forms of violence had stopped, but the consequences rippled on through politics, privacy, and the very idea of national sovereignty. This saga doesn't end with a tidy conclusion. Its final echoes are warnings. Power adapts, and new forms of control will inevitably rise to fill any vacuum. The story asks us to reflect on accountability, on who gets to write history, and on the fragility of systems that rely on secrecy. But there's also a human lesson here. Individuals matter. Acts of sacrifice, defiance, and courage reshape the world more than any blueprint for domination. Memory and transparency became weapons of a different kind, ones that could prevent the darkest chapters from repeating. Metal Gear's saga is a tale of machines and men, but it is above all a human story. It asks whether the ends ever justify the means, and whether a better world can be built when those who decide the rules hide in the dark. The story's greatest legacy is not a triumph, but a question. Who will watch the watchers, and how will the next generation choose to answer that call? If this thread of history gripped you, there are deeper chapters to explore. Personal letters, betrayals that read like tragedies, and moments where one choice changed the fate of nations. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this journey into the shadows, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more stories like this.